The alley reeked of piss and rotting garbage, a narrow throat of darkness between two buildings that the city had forgotten. November rain fell in cold, relentless sheets, turning the cracked pavement into a mirror that reflected nothing but shadows. This was Chicago's underbelly, the place where broken things went to disappear. Dante Caruso didn't belong here. His $1,200 suit was already ruined, the Italian wool darkening with moisture as he stood over the man bleeding at his feet. Marcus Bellini had stolen from him. Not much, $32,000 skimmed from the weekly collections over the course of 6 months. In the world of organized crime, it was pocket change. But theft wasn't about the money. It was about respect. It was about the message you sent when someone thought they could take what was yours. Please, Marcus wheezed through broken teeth, his hands zip-tied behind his back. Blood ran from his nose, mixing with the rain. Please, boss, I got kids. You should have thought about your kids before you stole from me, Dante said. His voice was flat, empty of emotion. He had learned a long time ago that emotion was a weakness. Emotion got you killed. Franco, his enforcer, stood to the side with a pistol hanging loose in his hand. You want me to finish it here, or are we taking him to the warehouse? Dante looked down at Marcus. The man was crying now, ugly sobs that echoed off the brick walls. Pathetic. Dante felt nothing. He had stopped feeling things the day his sister Isabella died, her small body torn apart by bullets meant for someone else. He had been 17. She had been 9. That was 21 years ago. Dante had built an empire on the ashes of that grief, becoming the thing that other men feared. He was the Caruso family's enforcer first, then its heir and now its head. He owned half of Chicago's South Side. Judges, cops, politicians, they all bent the knee or paid the price. He didn't save people. He destroyed them. Take him too, Dante started to say. That's when he heard it. A sound so small it shouldn't have registered over the drumming rain and the distant wail of sirens. But Dante's instincts had been sharpened by years of survival, and something in that sound made him stop mid-sentence. A whimper. High-pitched. Terrified. Young. Shut up. Dante snapped at Marcus, whose sobbing died immediately. Franco froze, his fingers still on the trigger guard, his head cocking to the side like a hunting dog. There it was again, coming from behind the dumpster 15 feet away, half hidden in the shadows where the streetlight couldn't reach. Dante moved toward it, his hand instinctively going to the gun holstered at his hip. Chicago's alleys were full of dangers, junkies, rats the size of cats, rival family soldiers looking to score an easy kill. He approached slowly, his shoes splashing through puddles that smelled like chemicals and decay. As he rounded the dumpster, he saw her. A child. She was wedged into the corner where the brick wall met the dumpster, her knees pulled tight to her chest, her arms wrapped around her shins. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Her dress, if you could call the thin, soaked cotton ragged dress, clung to her skeletal frame. No coat, no shoes. Her bare feet were cut and filthy, caked with mud and blood. But it was her face that stopped Dante cold. She was looking directly at him with eyes that were far too old for her age. Dark, haunted eyes that had seen things no child should see. Eyes that recognized exactly what he was. A monster. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stared at him, shivering so violently her teeth chattered like dice in a cup. For a moment, Dante forgot about Marcus bleeding on the ground behind him. He forgot about Franco waiting for orders. He forgot about the empire he had built and the violence he had committed to maintain it. All he saw was this child, drenched and terrified, looking at him like he was death itself. Slowly, carefully, Dante lowered himself down. He didn't crouch. He went down on one knee in the filthy water, bringing his face level with hers. The rain plastered his dark hair to his forehead. Water ran down his neck, soaking into his collar. He made himself small. "Hey," he said quietly. His voice, usually sharp as a blade, softened. "What are you doing out here?" The girl didn't answer. She pressed herself harder against the wall, as if she could melt into the brick and disappear. Her lips were blue. Hypothermia, Dante's mind registered clinically. She's freezing to death. "I'm not going to hurt you," Dante said, though he knew the words were meaningless. Everyone said that. The men who hurt children always said that first. The girl's eyes darted past him to where Franco stood, the gun still visible in his hand. Then back to Dante's face. She was calculating, trying to determine which death would come first, from the cold, or from the man kneeling in front of her. Then she asked it. The question came out in a whisper, so quiet that Dante almost missed it beneath the sound of the rain. "Mister, do monsters hurt little girls?" The words hit Dante like a physical blow. He felt something crack inside his chest, something he thought had calcified into stone years ago. The question wasn't abstract. It wasn't philosophical. This child, shivering in a Chicago alley he checked his watch, 11:47 at night, wasn't asking about fairy tales. She was asking if he was going to hurt her. She was asking if she had fled from one monster only to find another. Dante looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the bruises on her arms, dark purple and yellow, in various stages of healing. He saw the way she held her left arm slightly away from her body, protecting broken ribs. He saw the terror in her eyes, but beneath that terror, he saw something else. Resignation. She had already accepted that the answer was yes. She was just waiting to see how bad it would be. If you're hooked on the story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Dante felt rage ignite in his gut. It was different from the cold anger he felt when someone disrespected him. This was hot, primal, the kind of fury that made men do stupid things. But he forced it down, burying it beneath layers of control. "Yes," he said finally. His voice was rough, raw. "Some monsters do hurt little girls." The child's face crumpled slightly, the last hope dying in her eyes. "But I won't," Dante continued, and he realized with a strange clarity that he meant it. "I promise you that. I'm not going to hurt you." She stared at him, searching his face for the lie. Dante held her gaze, letting her see whatever she needed to see. He didn't know what expression he was wearing. He only knew that something fundamental was shifting inside him, like tectonic plates grinding against each other before an earthquake. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Maya," she whispered. "Maya," Dante repeated. The name felt fragile in his mouth. "I'm Dante. Can you tell me what happened to you?" Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She had learned, Dante realized with sick certainty, that crying made things worse. "I ran away," she said. Her voice was hoarse, scratched raw from screaming or crying or both. "From where?" "The house." She said it like it was a place with capital letters, a proper noun of horror. "Mr. Coleman's house." Dante's jaw tightened. He knew that name. Gerald Coleman ran a network of foster homes on the South Side, supposedly providing care for children the system had abandoned. Dante had heard whispers about Coleman over the years, rumors that the homes were fronts for something darker. But it had never been his business. Children weren't part of his world. He was beginning to realize that had been a mistake. "Did Mr. Coleman hurt you?" Dante asked, though he already knew the answer from the bruises mapping her skin. Maya nodded, a tiny movement of her head. "Are there other kids at the house?" Another nod. "How many?" "7," Maya whispered. "There used to be 8, but Jessie got taken away. She never came back." The rage in Dante's chest grew hotter, but he kept his face neutral. He couldn't scare her. Not now. Not when she was looking at him like he might be the first person in her short life to actually help instead of harm. Behind him, he heard Franco shift his weight. "Boss, we got a situation here." The enforcer's voice was low, urgent. He met Marcus, still zip-tied and bleeding, a witness to everything. Dante didn't turn around. He kept his eyes locked on Maya. "Handle it quietly," Dante said. "Take him to the warehouse. I'll deal with him tomorrow." "What about the—" "I said I'll handle it," Dante snapped, his voice hardening into the tone that made grown men flinch. Franco knew better than to argue. Dante heard the sound of Marcus being dragged away, the man's protests muffled by Franco's hand over his mouth. A car door opened and closed. An engine started. Then silence, except for the rain. Dante returned his attention to Maya. She was watching him with those ancient eyes, trying to understand what was happening. "You're cold," Dante said, stating the obvious. "And you're hurt. I'm going to take you somewhere safe, somewhere warm." "Okay." "You said monsters hurt little girls," Maya said, her voice trembling. How do I know you're not lying? It was a smart question. Trust was earned, not given, and this child had learned that lesson in the cruelest way possible. Dante reached up and unbuttoned his suit jacket. It was ruined anyway, soaked through and streaked with grime from kneeling in the alley. He shrugged it off and held it out to her. Because if I wanted to hurt you, I would have already done it, he said simply. Bad men don't usually kneel in the rain and ruin $1,000 suits. They don't ask permission. They just take. Maya looked at the jacket, then at his face, then back at the jacket. Slowly, cautiously, she reached out and took it. The moment her fingers touched the expensive wool, she pulled it close, wrapping it around her shivering body. It swallowed her whole, the sleeves hanging past her hands, the hem pooling around her bare feet. For the first time since Dante had found her, her shaking eased just slightly. Better? He asked. She nodded. Dante stood up slowly, giving her time to adjust. He was a large man, 6'3", broad-shouldered, built like the enforcer he used to be. He knew how to use his size to intimidate, but right now, he wanted to be as non-threatening as possible. Can you walk? He asked. Maya tried to stand, pushing herself up against the wall. Her legs trembled, and she immediately collapsed back down with a small cry of pain. Her feet were too damaged, her body too weak from cold and hunger. Okay, Dante said. I'm going to pick you up. Is that okay? It wasn't really a question. She needed help, and he was offering it. But he wanted her to feel like she had a choice. Children who had been hurt needed to feel like they had control over something, even if it was just this. Maya hesitated, then nodded. Dante bent down and gently scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, all sharp angles and fragile bones. He could feel her ribs through the thin dress. When was the last time she ate a real meal? He wondered with a surge of fury. Maya tensed in his arms, every muscle rigid with fear. But she didn't fight. She didn't scream. She just pressed her face against his shoulder and held on. Dante carried her out of the alley and into the streetlight. His Mercedes was parked at the curb, the engine still running, exhaust billowing white in the cold air. Anthony, his driver, was leaning against the hood smoking a cigarette. When he saw Dante approaching with a child in his arms, the cigarette fell from his lips. Boss! Anthony's voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes were wide with shock. Open the door, Dante ordered, and turn the heat up, all the way. Anthony scrambled to obey, grinding the cigarette under his heel and pulling open the rear door. Dante slid into the leather interior, settling onto the seat with Maya still in his arms. The warmth from the heater hit them immediately, and Maya made a small sound of relief. Where to? Anthony asked, sliding into the driver's seat. The penthouse. There was a pause. Boss, are you sure? I didn't stutter. Anthony knew better than to question Dante's orders twice. He put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. The penthouse was Dante's private sanctuary, a fortress of glass and steel on the 87th floor of the Caruso Tower overlooking Lake Michigan. No one went there except Dante. It was the one place in the world where he didn't have to be the Don, where he could take off the mask and just exist. And now he was bringing a traumatized 7-year-old there. He looked down at Maya. She was still wrapped in his jacket, her small body finally starting to thaw in the heated car. Her eyes were closed, but he could tell she wasn't asleep. She was too tense, too aware of every movement he made. Maya, he said softly, when was the last time you ate? Her eyes opened. I don't know. Yesterday, maybe. They only feed us once a day sometimes. Dante's hands clenched into fists. He forced himself to relax before she noticed. We'll fix that, he said. There's food at my place. Real food. And clean clothes. And a bed. A bed, Maya repeated, as if the concept was foreign to her. Yes, a real bed with sheets and blankets. And no one's going to hurt you there. No one can even get into the building without my permission. Maya looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something other than fear in her eyes. It might have been hope. It was so fragile he was afraid to name it. Are you really going to help me? She asked. Yes. Why? It was the same question Dante had been asking himself since he knelt down in that alley. He could have walked away. He could have called the police and let the system handle it. That would have been the smart thing, the safe thing, the thing that didn't complicate his life. But he had knelt down. He had looked into her eyes. And he had seen Isabella. "Because someone should have helped me when I was your age," Dante said quietly. "And no one did." Maya studied his face with that too-old gaze. "Were you scared too?" "Yes." "Of monsters?" Dante looked out the window at the city, lights blurring past. Chicago. His city. The empire he had built from blood and fear and violence. He thought about his father, who had beaten him until he learned to be hard. He thought about the first man he killed at 19, how his hands had shaken afterward. He thought about the person he had become, the monster he had needed to be to survive. "I became the monster," he said, turning back to Maya, "so I wouldn't have to be scared anymore." He expected her to flinch away, to finally understand what he was. But instead, she just nodded, as if his answer made perfect sense. "Can I become a monster too?" she asked seriously. The question was so unexpected that Dante almost laughed. Almost. But there was something in her tone that stopped him. She wasn't joking. She was asking if she could learn to be dangerous, to be the thing that hurt instead of being hurt. "No," Dante said firmly. "You don't need to become a monster, Maya. You just need someone to protect you from them." "Like you." "Like me." The car pulled up to the Caruso Tower, a monolith of black glass that pierced the Chicago skyline. The building housed Dante's legitimate businesses, real estate holdings, investment firms, import-export companies that actually did import and export legal goods. The top 10 floors were his private domain. Anthony opened the door. Dante stepped out, still carrying Maya. The lobby was empty except for the night security guard, Vincent, who stood up straighter when he saw Dante. His eyes flicked to the child wrapped in Dante's jacket, then back to Dante's face. He was smart enough not to ask questions. "Evening, Mr. Caruso." Dante nodded and walked to the private elevator, the one that required both a key card and a retinal scan. He swiped the card, stared into the camera, and the doors slid open with a whisper. As the elevator climbed, Maya looked around at the polished chrome and the soft lighting. "Is this your house?" she asked. "My office building. My home is at the top." "How high is the top?" 87 floors. Her eyes widened. "That's really high." "Yes, it is." "Can the monsters get up there?" Dante looked down at her. "No, Maya. The monsters can't reach you there. I promise." The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. The space was vast and open, all floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive furniture arranged with cold precision. The lights of Chicago spread out below them like a sea of stars. It was beautiful and sterile and utterly empty. Maya's eyes went wide as she took in the space. She had gone from hiding behind a dumpster to standing in a palace in the sky. The shock was written all over her small face. "You live here alone?" she asked. "Yes." "It's big." "Yes, it is." She looked up at him, and he saw the question in her eyes before she asked it. "Don't you get lonely?" The question hit Dante harder than it should have. "Yes," he wanted to say. "I'm so lonely it feels like I'm drowning." But he swallowed the words. "Sometimes," he admitted instead. "Come on. Let's get you cleaned up." He carried her down the hallway to the guest bedroom, a room that had never been used. He set her down gently on the edge of the massive bed, and she sank into the mattress with a small gasp of surprise. "This is soft," she said, running her hand over the Egyptian cotton duvet. "I'll get you some clothes," Dante said, "and then you can take a shower. The bathroom is through that door." He went to his own bedroom and pulled out the smallest t-shirt he owned. It would still be enormous on her, but it was clean and dry. He grabbed a pair of sweatpants with a drawstring and thick wool socks. When he returned, Maya was still sitting on the bed, looking around the room with wonder. He handed her the clothes. "Take your time," he said. "The hot water doesn't run out. Get warm." Maya took the clothes and disappeared into the bathroom. A moment later, he heard water running. Dante stood in the hallway, listening to make sure she was okay. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed. "Cilio," he said when his intelligence officer answered. "I need everything you have on Gerald Coleman. Southside foster care operator. Financials, properties, associates, police records. Everything. And I need it in 1 hour." "On it, boss. Anything specific I'm looking for?" "Child trafficking. Abuse. Anything that gives me a reason to put a bullet in his head." There was a pause on the other end. Understood. Dante ended the call and walked to the kitchen. He wasn't sure why, but he wanted to make her something. Something that said safe and home, even though he barely knew what those words meant anymore. He decided on pasta. Simple, comforting. His grandmother's recipe, spaghetti with butter, garlic, and parmesan. Nothing fancy. Just food. By the time Maya emerged from the bathroom, her hair damp and clean, wearing his t-shirt like a dress, the pasta was ready. She walked into the kitchen slowly, her bare feet silent on the marble floor. "Hungry?" Dante asked. She nodded. He set a plate in front of her and watched as she ate. She was careful at first, testing each bite as if expecting it to be poisoned. But hunger won out, and soon she was eating with the desperate focus of someone who didn't know when the next meal would come. When she finished, she set down the fork and looked at him with those dark, serious eyes. "What happens now?" she asked. Dante leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "Now you sleep. Tomorrow, I'm going to make sure, mister. Coleman never hurts you or any other child again." "How?" "You don't need to worry about that." "Will you hurt him?" Dante looked at this child, this small survivor who had asked him if monsters hurt little girls. He had promised her the truth. He wouldn't stop now. "Yes," he said. "I will." Maya nodded slowly, and Dante saw something shift in her expression. It might have been relief. It might have been satisfaction. Whatever it was, it told him everything he needed to know about what Gerald Coleman had done to her. "Good," she whispered. Dante didn't sleep that night. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand, watching the city lights blur and sharpen in the rain. Behind him, down the hallway in the guest bedroom, Maya was finally asleep. He had checked on her twice, once at 1 a.m., once at 3 a.m. Both times she had been curled into a tight ball in the center of the massive bed, his jacket still wrapped around her like armor. She didn't sprawl out the way children should. She didn't take up space. Even in sleep, she was trying to make herself small, invisible, unworthy of notice. It made Dante want to burn the world down. His phone buzzed at 4:17 a.m. Cilio's name lit up the screen. "Talk," Dante said, bringing the phone to his ear. "Got your intel on Coleman." Cilio's voice was sharp, alert despite the hour. "The man never slept. It's worse than you think, boss." "How much worse?" Gerald Coleman runs 6 foster homes across the South Side, licensed by the state, approved by Child Services, funded by taxpayers. On paper, everything looks clean. But I dug deeper. Dante turned away from the window, his free hand clenching into a fist. "And financial irregularities. Large cash deposits every month that don't match the state funding he receives. Wire transfers to offshore accounts in the Caymans. And get this, he's got connections to Viktor Kozlov." Dante's blood went cold. Viktor Kozlov was a Russian oligarch with fingers in everything from arms dealing to human trafficking. He operated out of Brighton Beach, but had been expanding into the Midwest over the past 2 years. Dante had managed to keep him out of Chicago, so far through a combination of bribes and strategic violence. "Trafficking?" Dante asked, though he already knew the answer. "Almost certainly." I cross-referenced missing children reports with the kids who went through Coleman's homes. 17 children in the last 3 years entered his system and then vanished. No adoption records, no transfers to other facilities. Just gone. 17 children. Dante closed his eyes. 17 lives erased because he had been too focused on territory disputes and profit margins to notice what was happening in his own backyard. "Where does Coleman operate from?" Dante asked. "Primary residence is a brownstone in Englewood. That's where he keeps the kids. He's got 2 associates, a woman named Ruth Hendricks who acts as the house manager, and a man named Carl Devers who handles security." "Security for a foster home?" "Yeah, that raised flags for me too. Devers has a record: assault, battery, weapons possession. He did 5 years in Stateville. Not exactly the kind of guy you hire to watch over vulnerable children. Unless you're doing something that requires muscle, Dante thought. "Send me the address," Dante said, "and put a team together. I want 6 men, armed, discreet." "When?" "Tonight." "Boss, if Kozlov's involved." "I don't care who's involved," Dante interrupted, his voice dropping to a lethal quiet. Coleman hurt a child. That child is now under my protection. Which means Coleman is a dead man walking. The only question is how much pain he experiences before he stops breathing. There was a pause. Understood. I'll have a team ready by sunset. Dante ended the call and set the phone down on the marble counter. He looked at the whiskey in his hand, then poured it down the sink. He needed to be sharp, clear. When he walked into that house tonight, he couldn't afford mistakes. Behind him, he heard the soft pad of bare feet on the floor. He turned to see Maya standing in the hallway, drowning in his t-shirt, her hair messy from sleep. Her eyes were wide and frightened. "I had a nightmare," she said, her voice small. "I thought maybe you left." Something in Dante's chest twisted. He crossed the kitchen and knelt down in front of her, making himself small again. "I'm right here," he said gently. "I'm not going anywhere. Promise. I promise." Maya looked at him for a long moment, then stepped forward and wrapped her thin arms around his neck. Dante froze, unsure what to do. He couldn't remember the last time someone had hugged him. Certainly not since Isabella died. People didn't hug men like him. They feared him, respected him, obeyed him. But they didn't touch him with affection. Slowly, carefully, he wrapped his arms around her small body and held her. She smelled like his expensive shampoo and something else, something sweet and innocent that had no place in his violent world. "You're safe, Maya," he whispered. "I won't let anyone hurt you again." She pulled back and looked at him. "When are you going to see Mr. Coleman?" "Tonight. Can I come?" "No." The word came out sharper than he intended. He softened his voice. "You need to stay here where it's safe. I'm going to have someone watch you while I'm gone." "Who?" "Her name is Rosa. She's worked for me for 10 years. She's kind. You'll like her." Maya didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "Will you come back?" "Yes." "What if the monsters get you?" Dante smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "Maya, I am the biggest monster in the city. Nothing's going to get me." Rosa Delgado arrived at 10 a.m. She was a grandmother of 5, round and warm with kind eyes and hands that knew how to heal. She had been Dante's housekeeper for a decade, one of the few people who saw him as something other than the Don. She had mourned with him when Isabella died. She had cleaned blood off his clothes and never asked questions. When Dante opened the door, Rosa took one look at Maya hiding behind his leg, and her expression softened into something fierce and protective. "Dios mío," she whispered. "Who is this pequeña?" "This is Maya," Dante said. "She's going to be staying here for a while. I need you to watch her today, while I handle some business." Rosa looked from Maya to Dante, reading the situation with the sharp intelligence that had kept her alive in a world of dangerous men. She knelt down, bringing herself to Maya's level. "Hola, Maya," she said gently. "My name is Rosa. I make the best pancakes in all of Chicago. Would you like some?" Maya looked up at Dante, seeking permission. He nodded. "Okay," Maya said quietly. Rosa stood and gave Dante a meaningful look. "We need to talk. In private." They stepped into the hallway, while Maya waited in the living room. Rosa's voice dropped to a fierce whisper. "What happened to that child? Foster home? Abuse? Possibly trafficking?" Rosa's face hardened. "And you're going to do something about it? Tonight? Good. I hope you make them suffer." She crossed herself, the gesture automatic even as she blessed violence. "That baby needs clothes, Dante. Real clothes that fit. And shoes. And probably a doctor. I'll send Anthony with a credit card. Get her whatever she needs." "She's going to need more than things," Rosa said, her voice softening. "She's going to need time. Safety. Stability." "I know. Can you give her that?" It was the question Dante had been avoiding since he found Maya in the alley. His world was violence and power and constant danger. Children didn't belong in that world. He had learned that lesson with Isabella. But looking at Maya through the doorway, seeing the way she was testing the couch cushion with her hand as if she'd never sat on furniture before, Dante knew he couldn't send her back into the system. The system had failed her. The state had failed her. The people who were supposed to protect children had sold her to monsters. "I'll try," Dante said finally. Rosa studied his face, then nodded. "That's all anyone can do. Now go. Do what you need to do. We'll be fine here." Dante spent the rest of the day preparing. He met with Cilio at a warehouse in the industrial district, going over the intelligence they had gathered. Gerald Coleman's brownstone in Englewood was a fortress. Security cameras, reinforced doors, bars on the windows. The man knew he had enemies. He had no idea he had just made the worst one. At 6 p.m., Dante stood in his bedroom, changing into tactical gear. Black cargo pants, a Kevlar vest under a dark jacket, a Glock 19 holstered at his hip, and a backup piece strapped to his ankle. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw exactly what he was. A predator preparing to hunt. He found Maya in the kitchen with Rosa eating dinner. She had new clothes, jeans that actually fit, a soft purple sweater, white sneakers. Her hair had been braided, and there was color in her cheeks for the first time. She looked almost like a normal child. "I'm leaving now," Dante said. Maya set down her fork and looked at him with those serious dark eyes. "Be careful." "I will." "Promise you'll come back?" "I promise." She slid off the stool and walked over to him. She reached up and took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being my monster." Dante felt something break and reform inside his chest. He squeezed her hand gently. "Always," he said. The brownstone was dark when Dante and his team arrived at 11 p.m. They had parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, 6 armed men moving through the shadows like ghosts. Cilio had disabled the security cameras, remotely. The element of surprise was theirs. Dante stood at the front door, Franco and 4 others flanking him. He could hear sounds from inside. A television playing, footsteps on the floor above, children crying. That last sound made his vision go red. "Breach," he said quietly. Franco kicked the door in with one massive boot. The reinforced frame splintered like kindling, and they flooded inside. The living room was filthy, stained carpet, broken furniture, the smell of rot and neglect. A woman sat on the couch, and Dante recognized her from Cilio's photos. Ruth Hendricks, the house manager. She looked up at the armed men, her face going pale. "What? Who are you?" "Shut up," Dante said. He looked at Franco. "Secure her. Find the others." His men moved through the house like a surgical strike team. Dante heard shouting from upstairs, the sound of someone running, then a gunshot. He didn't flinch. He walked up the stairs, following the sound of children crying. The second floor was lined with small bedrooms, each containing 3 or 4 bunk beds crammed together. The doors had locks on the outside, prison cells disguised as rooms. Dante opened the first door. 7 children stared at him with the same haunted eyes Maya had. They ranged in age from maybe 5 to 12, all of them thin and bruised and terrified. They were in pajamas that were too small, sitting on mattresses with no sheets. "I'm not going to hurt you," Dante said, his voice rough with barely controlled rage. "I'm here to help." The children didn't move. They had heard those words before from men who lied. One of his men, a soldier named Vince, appeared at Dante's shoulder. "Boss, we found Devers in the back room." He tried to run. Franco put a bullet in his leg. "Good. Where's Coleman?" "Not here. Neighbors say he comes by twice a week to check on things." Dante's jaw tightened. He wanted Coleman, needed Coleman. But right now, these children needed him more. He looked back at the 7 terrified faces. "Listen to me," he said, his voice softer now. "My name is Dante. I know a little girl named Maya. She used to live here. She's safe now, and you're going to be safe too. I'm going to take you out of this house tonight. We're going to find you real homes. Good homes. But first, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Slowly, a girl who looked about 10 years old stood up. She had long dark hair and a scar above her eyebrow. "Is Maya really safe?" she asked. "Yes. She's at my home right now, eating pancakes and sleeping in a real bed." The girl looked at the others, then back at Dante. "We'll come with you." It took 2 hours to get the children out of the house and into vehicles. Dante called in every favor he had, doctors who didn't ask questions, social workers who could be trusted, a judge who owed him for making a scandal disappear. By 3 a.m., all 7 children were being evaluated at a private clinic, and arrangements were being made for temporary placement with vetted families. But Dante's work wasn't finished. He stood in the living room of the brownstone, looking at Ruth Hendricks tied to a chair. She was crying, mascara running down her face. Please, she sobbed. I was just doing what I was told. Coleman said they were going to good homes. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, Dante corrected. He walked over to where Carl Devers was slumped against the wall, his leg wrapped in a tourniquet to stop the bleeding from the bullet wound. The man was conscious but pale with shock. Where's Coleman? Dante asked. I don't know, man. I swear I don't. Dante pulled his gun and pressed it against Devers' good leg. Wrong answer. Wait. Devers screamed. He's got a place. A cabin up in Wisconsin. Near Lake Geneva. He goes there when things get hot. Address. Devers rattled off the location. Dante memorized it, then looked at Franco. Call Cilio. Have him verify. If this piece of shit is lying, kill him. And if he's telling the truth, kill him anyway. Make it look like an accident. Same with her. He gestured to Ruth. They were running a trafficking ring that was abusing children. I don't want them to have a trial. I don't want them to have lawyers. I want them erased. Franco nodded. Done. Dante walked out of the brownstone and climbed into the SUV. Anthony was waiting in the driver's seat. Home, Dante said. Not Wisconsin. Coleman can wait until morning. Right now, I need to check on Maya. The drive back to the tower was quiet. Dante looked out the window at the city passing by, and for the first time in 21 years, he felt something other than emptiness. He felt purpose. When he walked into the penthouse at 4:30 a.m., Rosa was asleep on the couch, but she woke immediately at the sound of the door. Everything okay? She asked. It's handled. The children are safe. Rosa crossed herself again. Gracias a Dios. Maya's been asking for you every hour. She's in her room. Dante walked down the hallway and opened the door to the guest bedroom. Maya was sitting up in bed, wide awake despite the hour. She looked at him, and her face flooded with relief. You came back, she said. I told you I would. Did you find the other kids? Yes. They're safe now. All of them. Even Sarah. She's the one with the long hair. Even Sarah. Maya's eyes filled with tears, and this time she let them fall. They're really safe. They're really safe. She launched herself off the bed and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and sobbing into his shirt. Dante held her, one hand gently cupping the back of her head. Thank you, she cried. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Dante didn't know what to say. He had spent his adult life causing pain, not preventing it. Being thanked for doing something good felt foreign and uncomfortable. You don't have to thank me, he said quietly. Yes, I do. You saved us. Maya, Dante said, pulling back so he could look at her face. I need to go away for a little bit tomorrow. Just for one day. I need to finish this. Her expression shifted to fear. You're going after Mr. Coleman? Yes. What if he hurts you? Dante smiled grimly. He won't get the chance. Maya studied his face, and Dante saw the moment she made a decision. She reached up and took his face in her small hands, forcing him to look directly at her. Promise me you'll come back, she said fiercely. Promise me you won't leave me alone. I promise, Maya. I'm not going anywhere. She nodded and stepped back, wiping her eyes. Okay, go get him. Dante left for Wisconsin at dawn with Franco and 2 other men. The cabin was exactly where Devers said it would be. An A-frame structure on 3 acres of wooded land, isolated and perfect for a man who wanted to disappear. Gerald Coleman was eating breakfast when Dante kicked in the door. He was a small man, balding and soft around the middle, wearing a bathrobe and slippers. He looked up at the armed men flooding his kitchen, and his face went white. What? Who are? Gerald Coleman, Dante said, his voice flat and cold. My name is Dante Caruso. You don't know me, but you hurt someone I care about. That was a mistake. Coleman's eyes darted to the phone on the counter. Franco was already there, yanking the cord out of the wall. I don't know what you're talking about, Coleman stammered. I run foster homes. I help children. You sell children, Dante corrected. He walked closer, and Coleman scrambled backward until he hit the wall. You beat them. You starve them. And then you hand them over to Victor Kozlov's people to be trafficked. Don't insult me by denying it. I was forced. Kozlov threatened me. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Dante said. He pulled out his gun, a silencer already attached. You made yours. Now you live with the consequences. Wait! Coleman screamed. Please. I have information. I can give you Kozlov's operation. Names, addresses, everything. Dante paused. Information was valuable. It could be used to dismantle the entire trafficking network. Save more children. But looking at this pathetic man cowering against the wall, Dante felt only contempt. I don't make deals with people who hurt children, Dante said. He pulled the trigger twice. Clean shots to the head. Coleman slumped to the floor, dead before he hit the ground. Franco looked at the body. What do we do with him? Lake Geneva's deep, Dante said, holstering his weapon. Let the fish have him. When Dante returned to the penthouse that evening, Maya was waiting by the door. The moment he walked in, she ran to him and threw her arms around him. You came back, she said, her voice muffled against his chest. I told you I would. Is it over? Is Mr. Coleman gone? Dante knelt down to her level. Yes, Maya. He's gone. He can never hurt you or anyone else again. Maya's eyes searched his face. Did you kill him? Dante didn't lie to her. She deserved the truth. Yes. She nodded slowly, and Dante saw something shift in her expression. It wasn't fear. It was acceptance. Good, she whispered. Then, softer. Does that make me bad? That I'm glad he's dead? No, Maya. That makes you human. He hurt you. It's okay to be glad he can't do it anymore. She looked at him for a long moment, then hugged him again. Can I stay here? With you? Dante felt his throat tighten. Maya, I'm not. I'm not a good man. My world is dangerous. You deserve better then. I don't want better, she interrupted. I want safe. And you make me feel safe. Dante closed his eyes. He thought about Isabella. He thought about the empire he had built on violence and fear. He thought about the fact that he had just murdered a man in cold blood and felt no remorse. And then he thought about the small, brave girl who had asked him if monsters hurt little girls, and who had decided he was worth trusting anyway. Okay, he said quietly. You can stay. Maya pulled back and smiled. It was the first real smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her entire face. Can I call you something other than Dante? She asked. Like what? She thought for a moment. How about Papa? The word hit Dante like a physical blow. Papa. Father. It was a title he had never thought he would carry, a role he was monumentally unqualified for. But looking at Maya's hopeful face, he found himself nodding. Yeah, he said, his voice rough. You can call me Papa. Maya threw her arms around his neck, and Dante held her, this small miracle who had walked into his life and changed everything. He was still a monster. That would never change. But maybe, just maybe, he could be her monster. The one who protected instead of destroyed. The one who knelt down in the rain and promised to keep her safe. And for the first time in 21 years, Dante Caruso felt something other than emptiness. He felt hope. 3 months later, the penthouse no longer felt like a mausoleum. Maya's artwork covered the refrigerator, crayon drawings of flowers and sunshine, and a tall man holding the hand of a small girl. Her sneakers sat by the door, bright pink against the marble floor. Her laughter echoed through rooms that had been silent for 2 decades. Dante Caruso, the most feared man in Chicago, now knew the words to Disney songs. He could braid hair. He understood the critical difference between the purple unicorn stuffed animal and the pink one. He had learned to check under the bed for monsters every night, even though he knew the real monsters were the ones who walked on 2 legs in daylight. He had also learned that healing wasn't linear. It was 2 a.m. when the screaming started. Dante was out of bed instantly, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun on his nightstand before his brain caught up. Not a threat. Maya. He crossed the hallway in 3 strides and opened her door. She was thrashing in the bed, tangled in sheets soaked with sweat, her small body rigid with terror. Her eyes were open but unseeing, trapped somewhere between sleep and memory. No. Please don't. I'll be good, I promise. Maya, Dante said, keeping his voice calm as he sat on the edge of the bed. Maya, you're safe. You're home. Wake up, sweetheart. He had learned not to touch her during the nightmares. The first time, She had lashed out, her nails raking across his forearm hard enough to draw blood. She had been horrified when she woke up and saw what she'd done. He'd told her it was okay, that he'd been hurt far worse by grown men with knives. But the guilt in her eyes had stayed with him for days. "Maya," he said again, louder this time. "It's Papa. You're in the penthouse. You're safe." Her eyes focused suddenly, reality slamming back into place. She saw him and immediately started crying, the kind of broken sobs that came from the deepest part of a child's terror. "I'm sorry," she gasped. I'm sorry. Shoo, you have nothing to be sorry for." Dante opened his arms, and Maya launched herself into them, clinging to him like a drowning person to driftwood. He held her, one hand rubbing gentle circles on her back. "Just a nightmare. It wasn't real." "It felt real," she whispered against his chest. "I was back in the house. Mr. Coleman was there. He said you weren't coming back. He said you were dead and it was my fault. I'm right here. I'm not dead, and nothing that happened to you was ever your fault. Do you understand me?" She nodded, but Dante could feel her trembling. The nightmares had been getting worse lately. Dr. Chun, the child psychologist Rosa had recommended, said it was actually a sign of progress. Maya's brain was finally processing trauma it had suppressed for survival. But knowing it was part of healing didn't make it easier to watch. "Do you want to talk about it?" Dante asked. "No." She pulled back and wiped her eyes. Can I sleep in your room tonight?" It had become their routine on bad nights. Dante would set up the small air mattress on the floor of his bedroom, and Maya would sleep there where she could see him, where she could confirm every few minutes that he hadn't disappeared. "Of course. Come on." 20 minutes later, Maya was asleep on the air mattress, wrapped in her favorite blanket, the one with stars on it that Rosa had bought. Dante lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the empire he had built and the tiny human who was slowly dismantling it. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Cilio's name lit up the screen. Dante answered quietly. "This better be important." "Kozlov knows." Cilio's voice was tense. "About Coleman, about the trafficking ring we shut down. He knows it was you." Dante felt ice settle in his stomach. "How bad?" "Bad. He's calling it an act of war. He's demanding a meeting." "When?" "Tomorrow. Neutral ground. Navy Pier. Noon." Dante looked at Maya sleeping on the floor, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. Innocent. Vulnerable. Everything he had sworn to protect. "I'll be there," he said. "But Cilio, double the security around the tower. I want 4 men on this floor at all times. If Kozlov tries anything, he won't get within a mile of her, boss. I promise." Dante ended the call and rubbed his eyes. He had known this was coming. You didn't dismantle a trafficking operation connected to the Russian mob without consequences. He had just hoped he'd have more time before the reckoning arrived. In the morning, Dante found Maya in the kitchen with Rosa, eating pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse. She looked up when he walked in, her eyes immediately searching his face for signs of worry. She was getting too good at reading him. "Morning, Papa," she said, her voice still rough from crying. "Morning, Piccola." He kissed the top of her head, then looked at Rosa. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" They stepped into the hallway. Rosa's expression was already concerned. "What's wrong?" "I have a meeting today. Could be dangerous. I need you to stay with Maya until I get back. Don't leave the penthouse. Don't open the door for anyone except me or Franco." Rosa's face hardened. "Is this about the Coleman situation?" "Indirectly. The people he worked for aren't happy I interfered with their business." "Those bastardos." Rosa crossed herself. "You be careful, Dante. That child needs you." "I know." He looked back at the kitchen where Maya was pushing pancakes around her plate, clearly eavesdropping. "I'm not going to let anything happen to her, Rosa. Or to me." "Good. Because if you get yourself killed, I'll drag you back from hell just to slap you." Dante smiled despite the tension coiling in his gut. "I believe you." He went back into the kitchen and knelt beside Maya's chair. "Hey, I need to go out for a few hours today. Rosa's going to stay with you." "Where are you going?" Her voice was small, worried. "Just a meeting. Business stuff. Boring adult things." "Is it dangerous?" Dante hesitated. He had promised himself he would never lie to her. But he also didn't want to terrify her before he left. "It could be," he admitted, "but I'm going to be very careful. And I'm going to come back. I promise." Maya set down her fork and looked at him with those two old eyes. "The bad people you told me about, the ones Mr. Coleman worked for, are they mad at you?" Sometimes Dante forgot how smart she was, how much she understood despite her age. "Yes," he said simply. "Because you saved us. Yes." Maya's jaw set in a stubborn line he was starting to recognize. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, a plastic keychain in the shape of a star that Rosa had given her. She pressed it into Dante's palm. "For luck," she said. "So you come home." Dante looked at the cheap plastic trinket, probably worth less than $1. He closed his fist around it. "Thank you, Maya. I'll keep it safe. Promise you'll come back?" "I promise." She hugged him fiercely, and Dante held her, committing the moment to memory. Just in case. Navy Pier at noon was crowded with tourists, the perfect neutral ground for a meeting between crime lords. Too public for an assassination, too busy for effective surveillance. Dante walked along the boardwalk with Franco and 3 other soldiers flanking him, his eyes scanning the crowd for threats. Viktor Kozlov was waiting at the end of the pier, exactly where Cilio said he would be. He was a tall man with silver hair and cold blue eyes, wearing a coat that probably cost more than most people's cars. 2 bodyguards stood behind him, hands in their pockets where weapons were certainly hidden. "Caruso," Kozlov said, his accent thick but his English perfect. "Thank you for coming. You demanded a meeting. I'm here. Talk." Kozlov smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Direct. I appreciate that. Let me be equally direct. You killed Gerald Coleman. You shut down a very profitable operation. You cost my organization a significant amount of money." "Coleman was trafficking children," Dante said, his voice flat. "That's a line I don't cross. And I don't allow it in my city." "Your city?" Kozlov's eyebrows rose. "Chicago doesn't belong to you, Caruso. You're just one player among many. And you've been getting too comfortable, too complacent. This was a reminder that there are bigger forces at work." "Is that a threat?" "It's a statement of fact." Kozlov took a step closer. "But I'm a businessman. I don't want a war. Wars are expensive. So I'm going to make you an offer." "I'm listening." "You stay out of my operations. I stay out of yours. We divide the city cleanly. You keep the south side. I expand into the west. We avoid conflict. We both profit. Simple." "And the trafficking?" Kozlov shrugged. "I move it to Milwaukee. You never have to see it. Your conscience stays clean." Dante felt rage ignite in his chest, white hot and barely controlled. This man was offering to simply relocate his operation, as if moving child trafficking 50 miles north somehow made it acceptable. "No deal," Dante said. Kozlov's smile vanished. "That's a mistake, Caruso." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. I shut down Coleman's operation because children were being hurt. You think moving your business to Milwaukee changes anything? You think I'm going to look the other way because it's not technically my territory? You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment," Kozlov said coldly. "That's weakness. And in our world, weakness gets you killed." "Then kill me!" Dante spread his arms. "Right here, right now. Take your shot. But understand that the moment you do, my organization comes for yours. Every asset you have in this state gets burned to the ground. Every cop you've bribed gets exposed. Every politician in your pocket gets a visit from the FBI. I've already prepared the dead man switch. You pull that trigger, and we both lose everything." It was a bluff. Partially. Dante had insurance files, yes, but using them would expose his own operations as well. Mutually assured destruction. The nuclear option. Kozlov stared at him for a long moment, weighing the threat. Finally, he smiled again, and this time there was a hint of respect in it. "You've changed, Caruso. 3 months ago, you would have taken that deal. You would have been pragmatic. But something's made you soft." His eyes glittered with dangerous knowledge. "Or should I say, someone?" Dante's blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" "I make it my business to know things. For instance, I know that you've been seen with a young girl. 7 years old, dark hair. Living in your penthouse. Very unusual for a confirmed bachelor like yourself. Kozlov tilted his head. One of Coleman's children, I'm guessing? The one who got away. Every muscle in Dante's body tensed. Franco's hand moved toward his weapon, but Dante held up a hand to stop him. Don't, Dante said, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet. Don't even think about finishing that sentence. I'm simply making an observation, Kozlov said smoothly. You've made yourself vulnerable, Caruso. Everyone knows the fastest way to hurt a man is through the things he loves. It's a lesson you learned with your sister, if I remember correctly. Isabella, wasn't it? Dante's hand shot out faster than Kozlov could react, grabbing the Russian by the throat and slamming him against the pier railing. The bodyguards reached for their guns, but Franco and Dante's men had their weapons out faster, creating a Mexican standoff in the middle of the crowded pier. Tourists screamed and scattered. Someone yelled about calling the police. Dante didn't care. Listen to me very carefully, Dante growled, his face inches from Kozlov's. You come near that child, you so much as look in her direction, and I will forget about territory and profit and every rule we operate under. I will hunt you across every continent. I will kill everyone you love, everyone you've ever spoken to, everyone who's ever said your name. And then I'll kill you slowly, over the course of days, until you're begging for death. Do you understand me? Kozlov's face was turning purple, but his eyes still held that cold calculation. You're proving my point about weakness. It's not weakness, Dante said, tightening his grip. It's focus. Now you know exactly what will happen if you cross me. The question is whether you're stupid enough to try. He released Kozlov, who staggered back, gasping for air. The Russian straightened his coat, his dignity as ruffled as his collar. This isn't over, Caruso. Yes, it is, Dante said. You're going to take your trafficking operation and get out of the Midwest entirely. I don't care where you go, East Coast, West Coast. Hell, go back to Russia. But if I hear about one child being hurt anywhere in my sphere of influence, our deal is off, and I become your worst nightmare. You can't police the entire country. Watch me. Kozlov stared at him, and Dante saw the moment the Russian realized he had lost. Not because Dante was stronger or had more resources, but because Dante had something worth fighting for beyond money and power. He had a daughter to protect. Fine, Kozlov spat. But this protection you're offering, it makes you a target for every organization that deals in this business. You've painted a bullseye on your back. Good, Dante said. Let them come. I'll be waiting. Kozlov turned and walked away, his bodyguards following. Dante watched until they disappeared into the crowd, then looked at Franco. I want surveillance on him 24/7. If he gets within 10 miles of the tower, I want to know about it. Boss, he's right about one thing. You've made yourself a target. I know. Dante pulled out his phone and looked at the picture he'd set as his wallpaper. Maya grinning at the camera, gap-toothed and happy, holding up a drawing she'd made. But some things are worth being a target for. When Dante returned to the penthouse 3 hours later, he found chaos. Not the dangerous kind. The domestic kind. Maya and Rosa were in the kitchen, both covered in flour. There was batter on the ceiling. The sink was overflowing with dishes, and the smoke alarm was beeping because something in the oven was definitely burning. What happened here? Dante asked, setting his keys on the counter. We made cookies, Maya announced proudly. Then, seeing his expression, we made a mess making cookies. I can see that. Rosa threw up her flour-covered hands. I turned my back for 1 minute. 1 minute. This child is like a tornado. Maya looked up at Dante with those big dark eyes, clearly waiting to see if she was in trouble. Dante looked at the disaster zone that used to be his pristine kitchen. He looked at the smoke detector, screaming its objection. He looked at Maya's nervous face, and he laughed. It started as a chuckle, then grew into full, genuine laughter, the kind he hadn't experienced in decades. Maya's face split into a relieved grin, and she started laughing too. Even Rosa couldn't help but join in. You're not mad? Maya asked between giggles. How can I be mad? This is the most life this kitchen has ever seen. Dante ruffled her hair, getting flour on his expensive suit jacket. He didn't care. Come on, let's see if we can salvage these cookies. They spent the next hour cleaning up and making a new batch together. Dante, who had broken men's fingers for disrespect, carefully showed Maya how to measure flour, who had ordered executions without flinching, patiently explained the difference between baking soda and baking powder. When the cookies finally came out of the oven, slightly burned around the edges but edible, Maya insisted they have a tea party. Dante found himself sitting on the living room floor, a tiny plastic teacup in his scarred hands, a 7-year-old seriously explaining the proper etiquette for addressing a duchess. This was his life now, and he wouldn't trade it for anything. That night, after Maya was asleep, Dante stood at his bedroom window looking out at the city. His phone rang. Cilio. Boss, we have a problem. What kind of problem? The good kind, actually. 7 more children have shown up at organizations we control. Foster kids, all claiming to have escaped from abusive situations. They're asking for you. Specifically asking for the man who saved Maya. Dante's grip on the phone tightened. Where are they now? Safe houses. But boss, we're not equipped for this. We're criminals, not social workers. Then we become social workers. Dante's voice was firm. Set up a foundation. Anonymous donor. Fund legitimate foster organizations. Vet them thoroughly. Anyone who passes inspection gets grants. Anyone who fails gets investigated. And any child who comes to us asking for help gets it. No questions asked. Boss, that's going to cost millions. I don't care. Do it. There was a pause. You've really changed, you know that? Yeah, Dante said, looking back at the hallway where Maya slept. I know. 6 months after finding Maya in the alley, Dante Caruso's empire had shifted. He still ran the South Side. He still commanded respect and fear in equal measure. But now, embedded within his criminal organization was something new, a network dedicated to protecting the most vulnerable. It started small. A few safe houses, some vetted foster families, anonymous donations to children's hospitals and abuse hotlines. But word spread, quietly, through the channels where desperate people whispered about last resorts and dangerous saviors. The man who protected children. The monster who only hurt other monsters. Dante found himself sitting across from terrified mothers escaping domestic violence. From teenagers who had aged out of the foster system with nowhere to go. From immigrants whose children had been taken by traffickers. He helped them all. Not out of altruism. Dante wasn't delusional enough to think he'd suddenly become a good person. He still ran illegal gambling operations. He still extorted protection money. He still broke the law daily. But he had drawn a line, and anyone who crossed it answered to him. Maya's influence had spread beyond just changing Dante. Rosa had introduced her to other children in the building, sons and daughters of Dante's legitimate employees. Slowly, carefully, Maya was learning to be a child again. To play and laugh without constantly looking over her shoulder. She started school in September, a private academy, where Dante personally vetted every teacher and staff member. He drove her there himself every morning, walking her to the door, kneeling down to kiss her forehead before she went inside. "Love you, Papa," she'd say. "Love you too, Piccola." The other parents stared. They whispered. Everyone knew who Dante Caruso was, but none of them said anything to his face, because they also knew that this man, who was capable of terrible violence, would die for the child holding his hand. The nightmares still came sometimes, but they were getting less frequent. Dr. Chin said Maya was making remarkable progress. The trauma would never fully disappear, but she was learning to carry it instead of being crushed by it. One evening in late October, Dante found Maya in his study, curled up in the leather chair that was far too big for her, reading a book. She looked up when he entered. "Papa, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That night in the alley, when you found me." She hesitated. "Why did you stop? You could have just walked away." "I was nobody." Dante sat down on the edge of his desk. It was a question he'd asked himself 1,000 times. "You asked me if monsters hurt little girls," he said finally, "and I realized I had a choice. I could be the monster in your story, or I could be something else. I could be the person who knelt down and listened." "So you chose to be good?" "No," Dante corrected gently. "I chose to be better. There's a difference. I'm still not a good man, Maya. I still do things that would scare you if you knew about them. But you protect people now. Isn't that good? It's complicated. I protect people from some dangers, while being dangerous myself. I've just learned to aim that danger at people who deserve it. Maya thought about this for a moment, then nodded. I think that's okay. Sometimes you need a monster to fight other monsters. Where did you hear that? You. You said it to me that first night. Dante smiled. I did, didn't I? Maya closed her book and looked at him seriously. Papa, I've been thinking. When I grow up, I want to do what you do. Absolutely not. Not the scary parts, she interrupted. The helping parts. I want to help kids like me. Kids who are scared and alone. I want to be the person who kneels down and listens. Dante felt his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe. Hope. Then that's what you'll do, he said. And I'll help you. Whatever you need. Promise. Promise. Maya smiled and went back to her book. Dante watched her for a moment, this small miracle who had walked into his life and changed everything. His phone buzzed. Another message from Cilio about a shipment, a meeting, the 1,000 details of running a criminal empire. But for once, Dante ignored it. Instead, he sat down in the chair next to Maya's and picked up his own book. They read together in comfortable silence as the sun set over Chicago, the city lights beginning to sparkle like stars. This was his life now. Monster and father. Criminal and protector. The man who knelt down in a dark alley and promised a terrified child that some monsters could choose to be something better. He hadn't saved Maya that night. She had saved him, and he was going to spend the rest of his life making sure that scared little girl in the alley never felt alone or afraid again. Because that's what fathers did. Even fathers who were monsters. Especially them. The Caruso Foundation Gala was the social event of the Chicago season. Politicians, celebrities, and wealthy donors filled the ballroom of the Drake Hotel, drinking champagne and bidding on auction items to benefit foster children and abuse survivors. At the center of it all was Dante Caruso, looking every inch the philanthropist in his tailored tuxedo. The press loved the narrative, former bad boy turned children's advocate. They didn't need to know about the criminal empire still operating in the shadows. That was a different Dante, for a different world. But the girl at his side, 9 years old now with her hair in an elegant braid, knew both versions. And loved them both. Papa, Mrs. Chin wants to talk to you about the new safe house funding, Maya said, tugging on his jacket sleeve. In a minute. Piccola. I'm talking to the governor. The governor can wait. Mrs. Chen has 12 kids who need beds. The governor laughed. She's got her priorities straight, Caruso. We can finish this later. Dante looked down at Maya, seeing the fierce determination in her eyes, the same determination that had kept her alive in that house of horrors. She was growing up strong and brave and kind despite everything she'd been through. You're right, he said. Let's go talk to Mrs. Chen. As they walked across the ballroom together, father and daughter, Dante caught sight of their reflection in the mirrored wall. A monster, and the girl who had tamed him. Or maybe just a man who had finally found something worth being human for. Papa, Maya said, looking up at him. Yeah, I'm glad you found me in that alley. Me too, Piccola. Me too. And in that moment, surrounded by the glittering lights and the champagne glasses and the people who thought they knew his story, Dante Caruso realized something profound. He had spent 21 years being afraid of becoming his father, violent, cruel, empty. But Maya had taught him that monsters weren't born. They were made by choices, and he had chosen differently. He had chosen to kneel down. He had chosen to listen. He had chosen love, and that made all the difference. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love the story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.